So without any more ado, I'm going to ask Dr. Ronita Bardhan to come and talk on behalf of her collaborator and herself, Professor Alemayehu. And yeah, the rest of the talks will follow after this. Ronita, okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, James, for the very kind introduction. Can we have the slides on, please? Thank you so much. So before I start my talk, I want to ask a very simple question, and let's all keep that question in mind while I describe what I'm going to describe through my presentation. How many of you adjusted your clothing as soon as you entered this room? And that means, are you feeling more cold or more warm? I'm guessing warm. All right. So that's really a bit of theatrics to start with, just to show that what indoor temperatures can be in very hot summer months when no ventilation or any sort of other mechanical devices are available. So I'm going to talk about heat and health risks in transitional housing in Ethiopia. And next slide, please. And this is a project we were lucky to be funded by the Africa Eldorado Fund, where I'm working with my collaborator from Jimma University, Professor Esayas Alemayehu, and I have my PhD student, Pan, who is also in the audience to take questions later on, and Professor Esayas's PhD student, Blesti, will also has been working with us. Next slide, please. So when we talk about heat burden, I think it's very evident from the past few months, even last year, when we faced quite a large amount of heat waves across the global south as well as global north. And during summer, when we see the disproportionate effect of heat on the global south, we can understand why it becomes much more important as we move ahead in climate change scenario. And why heat becomes doubly jeopardized, especially in that region in Africa, is because with heat burden comes also the burden of vector-borne diseases. So we see the second graph there where with the temperature, what is the rate of incidence of malaria and dengue kind of increases is quite also high. So that means there is a reason and need to understand what does this heat means to the people, how do we mitigate it, because it has now become an inevitable challenge. Next, please. And this would be a short presentation from my collaborator, who is definitely online. Could you please switch on the video, please?
With about 120 million people, Ethiopia is the second most populous nation in Africa, with a very rapid urbanization rate, which means it's growing at about 5.4% a year, which is quite rapid. Substantial literature projects the urban population will triple to 42.3 million by 2030, which means 30% of the country's people in urban area by 2028. However, the recent surveys found 80% of this country's urban population live in slums areas, you can see here in Addis. As a result, there is a chronic housing deficit in urban area, both for unhoused and underhoused. So hence, in Ethiopia, there is an urgent need of massive affordable housing that aim to improve the main slum settlement, as you can see here, reported by Guardian, and ensuring access to decent and provide low-cost housing for the poor urban dwellers, which are homeless and inadequate sheltered. So when you come to the in this regard, the Ethiopian government has created many initiatives to provide affordable houses for low-income citizens at different times. As an example, particularly in 2005, integrated housing development program, that's what you call it, HDP, as one of the focus to build high-rising residential buildings, which is primarily targeting to supply affordable houses to low and middle-income urban dwellers. And then this IHDP is not only concentrated in Addis, but it's distributed in the different parts of the country, as you can see here, including the Oromia regions where Jimma is belong. Although the IHDP generates about 400,000 units, which means an average of 33,000 per year between 2006 and 2018, the building's occupants are continuously suffering and claiming by building microclimate conditions like overheating and indoor air quality problems. Well, these problems will have prolonged in the existing as well as in the future IHDP built environment unless research-supported mitigation action has been taken. So to this effect, to conduct comprehensive research, Jimma has been selected among 40 cities in Ethiopia. Here is Jimma, which belongs to the southwest parts of Ethiopia. It is the oldest and the largest city in southwestern Ethiopia and characterized by increasing intensity of urban growth and population growing also at an alarming rate. Population in Jimma currently about 207,573. When you look at the population density is about 4,151 person per square kilometer, which makes Jimma ranks 8th in Ethiopian population. So the shortage of affordable housing, like other cities, problem in Jimma city is one of the pressing matters that call for immediate action. As a result, Jimma city, as you can see here, Office for Housing and Urban Development has already constructed 1,653 condominium houses, ground plus 4, ground plus 3. And the type of condominium, as you can see here, is stable. There are differences in floor areas. Some are very small floor area, but you could have also large floor area. In our specific research, we are focusing about 60% of the house type, which is 1 bed and 2 beds rooms. This is the plan as indicators, and depending on the socio-economics, we want to go a little bit deep and have a look at thermal comfort and related issues, and particularly with the building design and the construction, as well as adaptation nature.
Thank you. Next slide, please. So this was just to give you a premise where we are situating our work. It is in this huge amount of housing that will be generated in the coming decades, and that means there's a need to understand what is the quality of life or the lived experience of these houses moving forward, and does it has burden from the climate, ongoing climate change and the heat. So that's where our project is situated. And if I have to share what basically the temperature or climate of Jimma particularly looks like, we have from January to beginning of April warmer months, and which is around 28 degrees, and cooler months are within 14 to 24 degrees. That would be beginning of July to beginning of September. So that's the zone. So they do expect higher temperatures in the beginning of the year and then lower temperatures in the middle of the year. And now I'm going to show, next slide please. So what we did was we wanted to see what happens to these temperatures, outdoor temperatures, when in different climate change scenarios. In A2 scenario, which is typically the worst scenario case always from the IPCC. And you can see that on an average, the temperature reaches within a range of sometimes 27, and the lowest would be around 11 to 13. So on an average, it is within 25, 26, which should be good, because even with climate change happening, it's not really very drastic. Next, please. But when you see this gray band, which basically shows us what's the thermal comfort range specifically for the Ethiopian context, so most of the outdoor temperature is within that range. Next slide, please. So given this context, we were trying to understand what happens to the indoor temperatures in these sort of houses. So we took two different cases. This is type A, and then another one which is more of squarish, which is called the type B. Both are G+4 buildings, accommodates around 20 tenement units, and each tenement unit is around 25 square meter units, with having either one bedroom or 2 bedrooms depending. Household size is around 5 to 6 total population, and majority of the population living indoors are women and children because of the socio-cultural context of the space. We then simulated, next slide please. We then simulated what happens to the indoor temperature when we have these sort of houses. So you can see while the outdoor temperatures were within the range of thermally comfortable range, the indoor temperatures, even if we do it today, is way beyond the thermal comfortable range. And interestingly, even in July, when you are expecting lower temperatures, the temperatures are actually going quite high. And to the extent it reaches levels which will have detrimental effects to health if continuously being inhabited in these spaces. Move next, please. Next, please. So we use this very global index, which is used to understand what happens to our body in terms of health conditions when certain temperature is being continuously reached in a particular space and our body is experiencing that. We expect to have the safe range always, specifically when we are designing buildings, we want to keep that range always throughout the year. Caution is still fine, it can be adopted. Whereas beyond caution, which is extreme caution to extreme danger, there is the need for severe interventions. That means there is a need for the energy demand will go up for cooling demands, and mechanical energy demand will. That means it's still going for non-net zero situation again. Next, please. So what happens when we do the same simulation in different types of units in type A? You can see what they look like in reality, and this is a simulated computer image of the building. And by the nomenclature of the units, if the unit is in the ground floor, it'll start with A, which is the type A, 1, and if it's in ground floor, it'll be A101, and if it's in the 5th floor, it'll be A505. So given that, next please. This is how it looks like. The south and east units, you can see majority of the floor units are within, if you remember, within the caution range, and where we can see almost 23 to 24 hours there will be discomfort experience. And that discomfort doesn't mean like just caution, which can be adopted, but there is also discomfort in terms of extreme caution or up to a danger level. Similarly, we did the same thing, and so from 2nd floor top, it's definitely a lot of discomfort is being faced. Number of hours of discomfort is quite high. Next, please. Same thing we did for type 2, which was type B, sorry, and we simulated for all the units. Next, please. And we do find this is performing a little bit better than type A, possibly because there is more spread of the thermal mass in the building. So, and there is this internal corridor which kind of takes away the heat from the stack effect. So we do see lesser number of units actually facing the extreme danger or the extreme caution levels. Next, please. So this is how it will look like in different years. The first column, a block of units would be in 2022, and in 2080, majority of the units in the 2nd floor, 3rd floor and 4th floor, and even to some 5th floor will experience extreme danger situation if no intervention is being taken. Type B performs a bit better with temperatures within 31 to 32 ranges, whereas there are certain units which does reach 34, 35 degrees, but majority of the units are performing much better than the type A. Interestingly, type A has more proliferation because it is less to cost in terms of construction. Also, you can construct large number of units because type A has a lesser footprint. Next, please. So we then tried to see what was the average mean air temperature and the operative temperature. Operative temperature is when, if you measure the air in this room, that will be the air temperature, but operative temperature is a combined effect of what we are feeling. So it may be 1 degree or 2 degree warmer than what exactly the air temperature is. And so we see it actually increases throughout the 2 different typologies, where type B still performs a little bit better. Next, please. The heat index Rs for comparison to type A and type B in 2080 would also perform a little bit more better, but however, the extreme danger situation still prevails. Next, please. Similarly, most vulnerable units we found out in type A would be in the 3rd floor, and which is basically the room sandwiched between all the other rooms, and in the type B would be in the 4th floor, again the same room which is sandwiched between 2 different buildings, which will actually face quite a large number of hours, almost more than in type B almost 50% of the year it will face extreme danger situation, and type A almost throughout the year. Next, please. Least vulnerable units were the green ones in the image. So A505, which means it has cross ventilation, and same thing happened in type B. It has both cross ventilation and do not face much of the extreme danger hours. Next, please. So type B was slightly performing better. We do feel and which is also commonsensical, ground floor was the coolest one, and in 2080 we will find almost 91% of the time in room 303 in extreme danger situation, which is quite high when we see from this current perspective. Next slide, please. So this was just an idea about what we progressed through in our project till now, and we are now, and these were all simulated cases. We are now endeavoring into a more experimental campaign where we will install sensors and we will conduct a lot of surveys. But our main idea is what is being reflected here, to understand what is the lived experiences from the perspective of quality of life also when people are living here, and what are their heat adaptation strategies and how climate sensitive they can be. Thank you so much.
So we have a discussion session at the end. Thank you for thanking Dr. Bardhan and Professor Alemayehu.